So now we can jump into the snowflake method a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about your genius ship, the snowflake method? And I know that it's kind of a big topic. So, and but like maybe kind of like just go over the surface and kind of tell what writers could benefit from by using the snowflake method. Yeah,
Right.
that's a big
Yeah.
question.
So the snowflake is essentially it's 10 steps for getting your first draft down on paper. Now,
Yep.
your first draft is not a completed book. It will need revision, but it won't need much revision if you have planned it out carefully. So
Yeah.
you start with a central idea. So for my first novel, the central idea was this. In one sentence, a rogue physicist travels back in time to kill the Apostle Paul.
I like that.
Okay. So that is the guiding sentence for the entire book. That's what, and if you ever to start typing and I sort of veer off into, something else, I've got that one sentence to always pull me back, right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a good idea to have that like taped up on your wall. This is what my story's about.
That's
Okay,
good.
but you need more than that. And at the second level, so step one is just write your one sentence summary of your novel. Step two is now to expand that out to a paragraph, right? Don't
Okay.
expand it to a book, expand it to just a paragraph, 5 sentences.
Perfect.
So the first sentence is now, what is your story setup, the backdrop for it? The
Okay.
second sentence is what happens in Act One leading up to a disaster at the end of Act One.
Okay.
And that disaster will propel your lead character into committing to the rest of the story. So
Mhm.
in the next sentence, you now talk about what happens in Act Two, uh, and culminating in a disaster that happens right at the middle of the story.
Okay.
Okay, then the next sentence takes you through the next act, which culminates in the third disaster that sort of uh, commits your protagonist to an ending. And if there's a villain in the story, it commits the villain also to the ending. And then the last sentence
Yes.
explains
Okay.
how do things end, how do things wrap up? Is it a happy ending or a sad ending?
Yep.
So you have 5 sentences there, one paragraph, and that now is what some people call it the 4-act structure. So,
Mhm.
okay, and some people call it the 3-act structure, where the Act Two is secretly, acts 2 and 3 of the 4-act structure. So
Okay.
they're really the 3-act structure and the 4-act structure are secretly the same thing.
Basically the same thing.
Okay, but at the transition points between each of the acts, there's always a disaster that sort of propels you from one act into the next.
Next.
And
Okay.
so when you have written your one paragraph summary, you now have a pretty good high level view of here's what the story's about. And this works for Pride and Prejudice, it works for Star Wars, it works for any story that you can imagine. When Harry Met Sally, there's a lot of different stories that you can apply this to. Once you have done that, you need to start defining your character. So the third step is you essentially sort of map out at a very high level. Here are the characters I've got. Here's my lead character.
Okay.
If it's a romance, I've got the hero, and I've got the heroine. Those are 2 characters. I've got sidekicks. I've got maybe another love interest that has to be thrown off.
Yep.
You define who your characters are, their names, their role they play in the story, a little
Mhm.
bit about them. And then, yeah, the fourth step of the snowflake, you come back to the plot and you expand your one paragraph summary out to 1 page. And you do
Okay.
that by taking each of those 5 sentences you wrote in the paragraph and expand each of those to a paragraph.
Lovely. Yes.
And by the end of that time, when you've done that, you now have 1 page that actually functions as a very short synopsis. You
That's
could, in
great.
principle, include this in a proposal.
That's
You could hand this to an editor or an agent at a writing conference
yeah.
after you have first, verbally told them your one sentence summary to get their interest,
There
and
you go.
then also your one paragraph summary so that they can see that, oh yeah, you've got a 3-act structure or a 4-act structure, depending
Yep.
on which way they fly there. So now you've got a page. synopsis. And that's really, once you've got that, the story practically writes itself. So now
Yeah.
you can flesh out your characters. You can go into their backstories. If you like Susie May Warren's story equation, you can work through that. But basically, you're working more on your characters.
Okay.
And then, so that's step 5. It's working on your characters again. So I tend to alternate plot, characters, plot, characters.
That's good.
In step 6, now you go back to that 1-page synopsis and you expand each of the paragraphs in that page to a full page. And now you've got a 4 or 5-page long synopsis.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And now you're adding detail. Okay. And then once you've done that, you go back and work on what I call a character Bible. So in step 7, you're taking your characters and now you're just kind of writing down all the details about them. What color are their eyes? You don't want the eye color changing from the middle of the story to the end of the story, or how many children they have. Or, if they've got 2 boys at the beginning of the story and 3 girls at the end, the readers are going to ask what happened. Yeah. And then step 8 is really quite important. And that is you now take your synopsis, your long synopsis, and you basically identify what are the scenes in this. And now you make either a spreadsheet, or if you use software, you make a list of scenes in order. This happens, 1 sentence, this is what happens in this scene. Next, another sentence, this is what happens here. And you get it all ordered, and you can move things around if you like. People used to use 3x5 cards, but it's easier in software.
Okay. Yeah.
So now you've got a list of, here are the scenes I'm going to write. And then the 9th step is you take each of those scenes and you ask, how does this scene advance the story? Is this scene a proactive scene or a reactive scene? And if you don't know what those are, you can read my book, How to Write a Dynamite Scene, using the Snowflake Method, because there are only 2 kinds of scenes that really work, proactive scenes and reactive scenes. Every scene needs to be one or the other. Each type of scene, proactive scenes have a goal and a conflict and a setback, 3 parts to it: goal, conflict, setback. And a reactive scene also has 3 parts, and that would be a reaction, emotional reaction, and then an intellectual dilemma, what do I do next? And then a decision at the end, here's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
And if you write your scenes just very, be disciplined here and force each scene to be either proactive or reactive, they'll all be good scenes. They'll be dynamite scenes. They'll be perfectly structured. And step 10 is the fun part, because now you just sit down and you go, okay, I'm going to write. I'm going to write a scene today, and the Spirit will move me to write it. And what is it? And so now you're again going to be creative, but on the lowest level rather than on the higher levels.
There you go.
Okay, so today I'll be a creative on writing this particular scene, and I already know it's a perfectly structured scene. Because it's either proactive or reactive, and I know what's going to happen. I know how it ties into the story, and therefore it will be a good scene. And I don't have to sit here angsting about whether the scene even belongs in the story. I know it belongs in the story. I just have to execute. At a low level, I just have to tactically drill it out. And so once you know that, you're writing with confidence. You can write 1,000 words an hour. Some people can write 1,500 or 2,000 words an hour. If you're dictating, you might be able to do 5,000 words in an hour, but you can drill out a scene that is going to be pretty good. It's at least going to fit into the story.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
And you do that, you do your 100 scenes, that's your novel, and you've got it written. And now you just have to go edit it.
That's exciting.
But your macro editor is not going to come back to you and say, by the way, you just don't have a story because there isn't a 3-act structure, because you solved that on day 2.
Okay, you didn't spend like 300 days or something writing a book.
Writing a story that doesn't actually work. Yes, there's no emotive payoff at the end. Now, of course, it may be that your vision for the story may drift. And so I tend to, I write my Snowflake document, I start writing, and at the end of part 1, I'll go back and look at things and say, is this still right? Is my Snowflake plan for this novel still good? If it is, everything's great. But if
Yeah.
my story has drifted and I've learned new things, I'm going to make a few tweaks to the design
There you
and
go.
then move on and write the second quarter of the book, and then I again rethink. So every quarter of the way through the book, I rethink a little bit to make sure that we're still on track, you know.
Yes, that's good.
And then at the end of the book, it's, I'll look at it again and say, okay, did I execute the plan that I wanted? And the answer is always no, I didn't execute the plan I intended, but I just executed a better plan.
Yeah.
Because through the course of the book, I developed a better plan. And so, uh, yeah, you've iteratively gotten to where you want it, to use a computer language, a computer
Yeah.
science term. You iterate to convergence.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's
so
that's awesome. Yeah, so it just became even a better book, like from like what your original idea was, and with all that time marinating in it and thinking about it and working on that one sentence, one paragraph, one page, 4 page, um, and then working with the characters, like you learn more things about the characters, and then you can put that into the 4 page and the scene. So that is just an awesome. I love the Snowflake method. So thank you.
well, I'm glad. 'Cause I can name people who hate it, but that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know you said that you are doing a series right now with the Jesus books. You use the Snowflake method for each book that you write, but do you have a Snowflake method type thing when you're doing series, when you're writing a series?
Yes. In
Okay.
fact, for the Crown of Thorns series that I'm talking about, that I'm working on right now, you'll notice that there are four books in the series.
Yes.
Okay, and so each of those actually corresponds to one of the acts in a large 4-act meta story.
Okay.
Like the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
story of the life of Jesus broken up, and so there, each one covers one of those acts.
Yeah.
Okay, and I won't go into great detail on that, but yeah, it's carefully thought out. Uh, yeah, at one point I thought it should be 3 books, but then I realized no, it really needs to be 4.
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome. I was just like kind of wondering with series, but I get that with like that makes a lot of sense. So that's cool that you can use it for series too.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Oh yes. So what are some major troubleshooting spots that in the Snowflake method that you've noticed many authors find issues in their books, and how could they troubleshoot that?
When you use the Snowflake method, there's a lot of problems that just can't happen for you. If you wrote your 1 paragraph summary, you're
Yeah.
going to have a well-structured story. It's going to have a 3-act structure or a 4-act structure, call it what you want. Uh, and so your editor isn't going to come back to you and say, this story had no point
Yeah.
to it. As long as you executed the plan, you can always fail to execute the Snowflake method effectively. But there's just certain things that can't happen. One issue that a lot of writers have is so they go to a writing conference and they sit down with an editor, and the editor says, well, what's your story about? And at that point they freeze, because they never really thought, how do I explain what it's about? It's
Yeah.
complicated. You have 2 hours, and the editor says, no, I have 10 seconds. hit me with what you got here.
Yeah.
And so, the writer will say, well, you see, there's this guy, and he works in the bus station, but no, that's the wrong place to start. You're not going to make that mistake. You will have thought about it.
Yeah.
And when the editor says, what's your story about, you will have your 1-sentence summary there. And again, it's muscle memory. You will have repeated that to yourself so many times
Yeah.
that even if you're unconscious, and the editor has to slap you awake,
Yeah.
And says, what's your book about? You say, I'm writing a suspense novel, time travel suspense novel about a rogue physicist who travels back in time to kill the Apostle Paul. Okay. And let me just explain what the point of that sentence is. People are either going to say, ooh, I like that,
Yeah.
or more likely they're going to say, oh, I'm not interested in that at all. You know,
Yeah.
how about those Yankees this year? What do you think their chances are? If that's what they say,
Yeah.
no amount of 3-act summary or character analyses or cool scenes are going to convince them to look further, because they're just not in your target audience.
Sure.
But if they go, ooh, tell me more about that, well, suddenly it's no longer you trying to sell them on it, it's them trying to pull details out of you. Okay,
Yeah.
and so in 10 seconds, in a 15-word or 20-word one sentence summary, you have completely changed the game from me trying to convince you my book is cool to you trying to find out how much cooler my book is than they even imagine.
Yes.
And it separates, it does what I call separating the sheep from the goats, right? The
Yep.
sheep go, yeah, I like that. And the goats say, nah, you know, I'm not interested in that.
Yep.
And that's very important. If you're
Yeah.
at a book signing and someone, you know, at a store and someone comes by your table and says, where's the bathroom? And, oh, what's your book about, by the way? You trot
Yeah.
out your one sentence summary. It takes 10 seconds. They either go to the bathroom or they hold it and they buy your book,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So it's a selling tool is the way I like to think of it. But
That's cool.
it's a divider into you're in my target audience or you're not in my target audience. And you should never be offended if someone's not in your target audience, right?
Yeah.
They're just not there. They don't want your book and they never will.
Yeah.
And no amount of arm twisting will make them in your target audience. So you might
Yeah.
as well just find out quickly and then move on to the next
Yeah.
potential sheep or goat.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Don't waste time trying to sell to a goat, right?
Yeah.
Spend
Yeah.
your time finding sheep as quickly as possible and eliminating goats as quickly as possible.
I love that. That's a great analogy.
Yeah, life is too short to sell grass to goats.
There you go. There you
goats,
go.
goats want thistles, right? Sheep want
Yeah.
grass.
Yeah. Totally. Or maybe even sometimes they want clothing off the clothesline or something like that,
Yes,
which is
yes,
totally odd.
yes, yes.
That's funny.